The narrative you're about to discover is the beginning of a deeply moving tale. One drawn from the authentic experiences of Winifred Winnie Calloway, whose early years were shadowed by destitution and melancholy. As our inaugural story for 2025, we've elected to commence the year with an account that demonstrates the power of affection and the significance of familial connections. Should these genuine chronicles of perseverance resonate with you, we invite you to follow our channel and show your appreciation. It requires just a moment, costs nothing, and enables us to continue documenting these significant narratives. We strive to commemorate the lived experiences of our cherished elders, ensuring that the recollections which have molded our current reality endure. Now ready yourself emotionally. The Chronicle of Winifred Calloway offers profound insights on existence and instills us with optimism. You see, my child, as I rest here before my residence at the age of 77, every recollection from my youth still clutches at my heart. Can you envision what it means to be young, yet forced into premature maturity? I, Winifred Calloway, alongside my brother Thaddeus, experienced this reality directly in that modest dwelling with roughly finished pine flooring, where the slender partitions failed to muffle the shouts during our parents' altercations. In 1958, our family was a living portrait of the poverty that plagued so many homes in Whispering Pines. I was only 11 years old, but already carried adult responsibilities on my shoulders. Maddox, my oldest brother at 14, was already working in the coal mine alongside father. Thaddeus at 13 was my other brother, sensitive and gentle. Our childhood was slipping through our fingers like water. Thaddeus at 13 was the third child. After him came Juniper, a little girl with big, cheerful eyes, just 8 years old, and finally the twins, Silas and Sawyer, two little whirlwinds of 5 years who filled the house with noise and life. Father, Mr. Harlan Calloway, at 32, drowned what little he earned from the mine and small farm in alcohol. Mother, Mrs. Maeve Calloway, with her 31 years marked by suffering, worked miracles with the crumbs that remained. Can you imagine the desperation of seeing your mother hiding in the kitchen crying while dividing a single measly egg among 6 hungry children? Thaddeus was different from an early age. Sensitive, he enjoyed music and taking care of his younger siblings. While other children played in the street, he often stayed home helping me care for the little ones when Mother went out to do laundry for other families, though Father increasingly forced him to work at the mine as he grew older. While other children played in the street, he often stayed home helping me care for the little ones when Mother went out to do laundry for other families, though Father increasingly forced him to work at the mine as he grew older. Our neighbor, Mrs. Delphine Whitaker, a 67-year-old widow, always said Thaddeus had an angel's soul. She lived alone. Her children had grown up, married and moved away, visiting her whenever they could. My father wouldn't accept Thaddeus's gentle nature, and the beatings were frequent. Our house had no toys. Thaddeus made corn-husk dolls for Juniper and me, and built small wooden cars for Maddox and the twins. On moonlit nights when Father wasn't home, Mother would let us stay in the backyard for a little while. Thaddeus would invent incredible stories, transforming our harsh reality into fairy tales. Mr. Atticus Mercer, the owner of the mercantile, sometimes gave us leftover bread from the previous day. His wife, Mrs. Imogene Mercer, always put a little more provisions on the tab when Mother went to buy on credit, pretending it was a mistake. These were small acts of kindness that helped us survive. Ms. Octavia Blackwood was the first person outside the family to notice Thaddeus's talent for music. The discovery of his gift was like a ray of light in our lives. It all started one Saturday afternoon when Miss Blackwood passed by our house and heard Thaddeus humming while sweeping the porch. "What a beautiful voice, Thaddeus," she complimented. Thaddeus, shy as always, smiled and lowered his eyes, but Miss Blackwood didn't leave it at that. "You like music, don't you?" she asked. When Thaddeus nodded, his eyes shining, she had an idea. The following Sunday after service, Miss Blackwood took Thaddeus to the old upright piano in the church. It was an old instrument, slightly out of tune, but still majestic. Thaddeus looked at the keys with a mixture of fascination and fear. "Go on, press a key," encouraged the teacher. With trembling fingers, Thaddeus pressed a key. The sound traveled throughout the empty church, and I saw his eyes widen with surprise and joy. From that day on, Miss Blackwood began teaching Thaddeus the fundamentals of music. She spoke with Reverend Hayes, who kindly allowed Thaddeus to practice on the church piano whenever there were no services. Thaddeus devoted himself body and soul. Every free moment he had, which weren't many, considering the work in the mine and household chores, he would run to the church to practice. At first it was just scales and simple exercises, but Thaddeus repeated them with a dedication I had never seen before. I remember one afternoon when I followed him to the church and, hidden behind one of the pews, watched as he played. His fingers, calloused from hard work, moved awkwardly over the keys, but there was so much passion in each note that I felt tears in my eyes. Weeks turned into months, and Thaddeus improved every day. Miss Blackwood was amazed by his progress. "He has a gift," she confided to Mother once, "a true gift from God." Father, of course, didn't look kindly on Thaddeus's new passion. "Piano is for sissies," he would grumble, and increased Thaddeus's workload at the mine, trying to keep him away from the instrument. But neither fatigue nor sore hands prevented my brother from practicing. One night, after a difficult day at the mine, I found Thaddeus sitting on the edge of our bed, eyes closed, fingers moving in the air as if playing an invisible piano. "What are you doing?" I asked curiously. "Practicing," he replied with a tired smile. "Miss Blackwood said I can practice even without the piano, just by imagining the keys." Thaddeus's first recital was at a Sunday service. Reverend Hayes had asked him to play a simple hymn during communion. I'll never forget the expression on his face when he sat at the piano, a mixture of fear and determination. But as soon as his fingers touched the keys, all nervousness seemed to disappear. The music that came from that old piano was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. After the service, many people came to congratulate Thaddeus. I saw his chest swell with pride, and for a moment, we forgot all the difficulties at home. Even Father, who had practically been dragged to church by Mother, seemed impressed, though he tried not to show it. That day marked a turning point in Thaddeus's life. Music had become more than a pastime. It was a refuge, a form of expression, a dream. And although the challenges at home continued, with each note he played, Thaddeus seemed to find a little more strength to face whatever came. "One day," he told me one night as we practiced together in the empty church, "I'll play in big places for many people, and I'll show Father that I can be a real man without stopping being who I am." Looking at my brother sitting at the piano, his eyes shining with hope and determination, I believed him and promised myself that I would do everything I could to help this dream come true. Our neighbor, Mrs. Delphine Whitaker, a 67-year-old widow, always said Thaddeus had an angel soul. She lived alone since her children had grown up and moved away, and she often invited us for sweet tea and buttermilk biscuits when she saw that the situation at home was particularly difficult. Her grown children left used clothes for us, which Mother adjusted at night. Mrs. Whittaker was like an angel to our family. I remember well the day she arrived with a huge bag of her children's clothes. There was everything. Faded but still good Wrangler blue jeans, cotton t-shirts, some even brand name, and even a pair of black PF Flyers sneakers that, though a bit worn, made Thaddeus's eyes shine. Mother would spend nights hunched over the old Singer Treadle sewing machine, adjusting each piece with her hands. She transformed long pants into shorts for the twins, cut sleeves, tightened waistbands. The sound of the sewing machine became our lullaby. "Look how beautiful," Mother would say, holding up a plaid shirt she had just adjusted for Maddox. "After ironing, it will look like new." Thaddeus received 2 pairs of Wrangler jeans that, even needing some patches on the knees, were much better than his worn-out pants. Mother sewed colorful patches on the inside of the repairs, making them look like a fashion detail. For Juniper, Mother transformed a large t-shirt into a dress, adding a calico fabric strip at the waist that she had saved from one of her old dresses. "Now you look like a princess," she said, as Juniper twirled happily. The twins fought over the t-shirts, even though they were a bit faded. Mother had to divide them equally. "Silas gets the green one, Sawyer gets the yellow one, and next week you'll switch." I got a denim skirt that Mother shortened and decorated with simple but beautiful embroidery. "Every young lady needs a pretty skirt," she said as she sewed. Mrs. Whittaker's clothes were like gifts from heaven. They weren't new, but to us, they were true treasures. At night, after everyone was asleep, I sometimes saw Mother separating buttons from very worn clothes to save. "You never know when you'll need them," she would say. The larger scraps became dish towels. The smaller ones she saved to make an Appalachian star quilt for winter. The fights between Father and Thaddeus started early, well before any of us really understood what was happening. I remember when Father caught Thaddeus playing with one of my cornhusk dolls. The beating Father gave him was so severe that Mother had to hide him inside the house for 2 days, until the bruises diminished. As Thaddeus grew older, things only got worse. When other boys began to get interested in baseball and rougher games, Thaddeus preferred to stay home helping Mother or taking care of his younger siblings. Father couldn't stand to see this. "This boy needs to become a man," he would shout, starting to force Thaddeus to go work with him in the mine. But the mine was no place for Thaddeus. His hands, which dreamed of touching piano keys, became covered with calluses and cuts. Many nights I heard him crying softly in our shared room as he tried to play an imaginary melody with his injured fingers. Mother suffered in silence, torn between love for her son and fear of her husband. Many nights I found her praying in the kitchen, asking God to change Father's heart, or to give Thaddeus strength to endure. My brothers reacted differently. Maddox, even so young, had already learned to imitate Father's behavior. Early on he began to taunt Thaddeus in ways that broke my brother's heart. Juniper and the twins, on the other hand, adored their older brother, always seeking his company and protection. I remember one day when Thaddeus was sitting on the doorstep, fingering an imaginary melody on his knees. Maddox ran by and shouted, "Look at little Thad playing piano. Why don't you go play dolls with the girls?" Thaddeus pretended not to hear, but I saw his eyes fill with tears once again. During dinner, Thaddeus kindly offered to help Mother wash the dishes. Maddox immediately mocked, "Be careful, Dad. Soon he'll want to wear Mother's dresses." Father laughed loudly, encouraging Maddox's behavior, while Thaddeus lowered his head in shame. On the rare occasions when we all played together in the yard, Maddox always tried to force Thaddeus to participate in rougher games. "Come fight with me, you sissy," he would provoke. When Thaddeus refused, Maddox would call him a delicate flower. One day, Thaddeus was teaching me how to make a flower crown when Maddox appeared with a group of neighborhood boys and started laughing. "Look at my brother, he's such a girl. Who wants to bet he'll marry another man?" The other boys laughed, and Thaddeus ran into the house, humiliated. Even the most innocent moments were targets for Maddox's taunts. When Thaddeus hummed while helping Mother in the kitchen, Maddox would imitate his voice in an exaggerated, effeminate way, making Father laugh and Mother sigh sadly. The worst part was seeing how these constant provocations affected Thaddeus. My brother, who used to sing and smile all the time, began to grow quieter and more withdrawn. He avoided being in the same room as Maddox and Father, spending more and more time alone. One night, I found Thaddeus crying hidden behind the chicken coop. Between sobs, he confessed, "Why do Maddox and Father hate me so much, Winnie? I just want them to accept me as I am." I tried to comfort my brother, saying Maddox was just a child repeating what he saw and heard from Father. But deep down, I knew that each taunt, each malicious laugh, each cruel imitation was slowly breaking Thaddeus's gentle spirit. It was painful to see how a family could be so divided. While Juniper and the twins adored Thaddeus, always asking for his stories and music, Maddox seemed determined to make his older brother's life a living hell. I wondered if one day Maddox would understand the harm he was doing, if one day he would realize he was hurting not just Thaddeus, but our entire family with his behavior. But at that age, all I could do was stand by Thaddeus, offering what little comfort a sister could give. Maddox's provocations didn't stop there. As the months passed, he found new ways to torment Thaddeus, always under Father's approving gaze. One Sunday afternoon after church, Thaddeus was invited by Reverend Hayes to play the church organ for some parishioners who had stayed. Maddox, seeing the scene, began making effeminate gestures, imitating in an exaggerated manner. Some neighborhood boys laughed, and Thaddeus, noticing, missed several notes. I saw his face turn red with shame, and my heart ached. On another occasion, during a rare visit from some cousins to our house, Maddox took one of the colorful handkerchiefs that Thaddeus used to clean the church piano and tied it around his brother's neck, shouting, "Look at Thad's new dress!" The cousins laughed. Father gave a side smile, and Mother just lowered her eyes, unable to defend her son. Things got worse when Maddox discovered Thaddeus's diary. One afternoon, while Thaddeus was at church practicing piano, Maddox invaded our bedroom and found the little notebook hidden under the mattress. He read aloud, mocking Thaddeus's most intimate feelings, his insecurities, and his dreams. I managed to take the diary from his hands, but the damage was already done. That night, Thaddeus cried himself to sleep. What saddened me most was seeing how these constant taunts were changing Thaddeus. My brother, once so open and affectionate, began to close himself off. He spoke less, rarely smiled, and his eyes, once bright, always seemed sad and frightened. I tried to talk to Maddox once when I caught him alone. "Why do you do this to Thaddeus?" I asked. He looked at me with a mixture of confusion and defiance. "Because that's how real men act." Or, "Father said if we don't teach Thaddeus to be a man, he'll turn into, you know." I realized then that Maddox, in his innocence, was just repeating what he saw and heard without really understanding the harm he was causing. One day I couldn't take it anymore. After another particularly cruel provocation from Maddox, I exploded, Can't you see you're hurting him? Thaddeus is our brother. He loves us and takes care of us." Maddox was surprised by my reaction, and for a moment I saw a flash of guilt in his eyes. But soon he hardened his expression and left, muttering that I was as much of a fairy as Thaddeus. As I watched Thaddeus fall asleep, I thought about our divided family. Maddox, so young and already so full of prejudice. Father, whose shadow seemed to darken our entire house. Mother, silent in her suffering. And Thaddeus, my dear brother, whose gentle heart seemed to wither a little more each day. The situation worsened each day. Father drank more, the beatings became more frequent, and the light in Thaddeus's eyes was fading. It was after one of these terrible fights that Thaddeus made me promise something. "Winnie," he said, holding my hands, "one day I'll leave this place. I'll be a musician. I'll play piano for the whole world, and when that day comes, I'll come back for you and the others. Promise you'll wait for me." With tears in my eyes, I promised. That night, lying in our narrow bed, we made plans for the future. A future where Thaddeus could be who he was, where we could be happy, away from the fights and fear. Sometime later, Thaddeus told me he found boys more attractive than girls. I had already guessed this, but I pretended it was news so as not to make him sad. "What did you say?" I said with a voice of surprise. "I don't believe it." And he began to tell me that he tried to like girls, but felt nothing. But sometimes he would see a handsome boy and think about him in a strange way that he didn't understand. But now everything was clear to him. He knew this would be explosive for the family, especially for Father and Maddox, who already suspected. It was 1958, and back then, being different was even more difficult than today. Thaddeus, now 14, already carried a weight that he didn't even fully understand. That night, after his confession, we spent hours whispering so no one would hear. "You know Gareth Hayes, the shoemaker's son?" he told me with a trembling voice. "Every time he passes by the house, my heart races. It's different from when I see the girls at school. With them, I feel nothing." I held his hand tightly. Thaddeus continued, the words coming out like a dammed river that finally finds a breach. "At school, the boys talk about girls, saying they want to date them, and I stay quiet. The other day, Fletcher asked me which girl I liked, and I didn't know what to say. He laughed at me, Winnie. He said I was weird. The prejudice came from all sides. At the church where Thaddeus played piano, some old women whispered when he passed by. 'That boy has the ways of a fairy,' they would say, crossing themselves as if my brother carried some evil spirit. Reverend Hayes, though kind, sometimes looked at Thaddeus with a mixture of pity and concern. At school, the situation wasn't better. The boys didn't call him to play baseball, and when it was time to form work groups, Thaddeus was always left for last. "Nobody wants to be in a group with me," he told me once, swallowing his tears. At home, besides Maddox's constant provocations and Father's violence, there were comments from relatives. Uncle Cyrus, Father's brother, was always saying Thaddeus needed correction. "That boy's too soft, Harlan. He needs a firm hand, or he'll become a disgrace to the family." Thaddeus told me that sometimes he tried to change, tried to be like the other boys. "I try to like girls. I swear I try," he said one night, crying softly. "But I can't. There's something wrong with me." "There isn't," I said. "I pray, ask God to help me change, but nothing changes. When I realize it, I'm the same as always. This bag of rotten garbage that nobody wants near because of the stench." Something terrible happened. That Saturday afternoon is etched in my memory like a deep scar. The heat was suffocating, and the smell of dust and sweat hung in the air. Uncle Cyrus had stopped by earlier, as usual, to have some moonshine with Father. I heard them talking outside, their voices getting louder as the bottles emptied. "Harlan, you've got to do something about that boy." Uncle Cyrus's voice echoed, loaded with venom. "It's obvious he's turning into a fairy. If you don't straighten him out now, it'll be too late." Father didn't respond, but the silence that followed was heavy, charged with a tension that made my stomach turn. When Uncle Cyrus finally left, he left behind a trail of malice that hung in the air like a dark cloud. It was at the end of the afternoon that everything exploded. Father, already staggering from so much moonshine, entered the house like a furious bull. His red, glazed eyes fixed on Thaddeus, who was sitting quietly in a corner of the living room, fingering an imaginary melody on his knees. "Come here, boy," Father roared, grabbing Thaddeus by the arm with such force that I saw my brother wince in pain. He dragged Thaddeus to the mirror on the wall of the living room. Holding him by the hair, he forced his face against the glass. "Look at yourself. Look hard." Thaddeus was crying, tears streaming down his face, contorted with fear and shame. His eyes, always so full of dreams, were now wide with terror. "Is this what you want to be? A disgrace to the family," Father shouted, spitting the words with hatred. Juniper and I couldn't stand it. We ran to them, grabbing Father's arms, begging him to stop. "Dad, please, you're hurting him." But Father pushed us away forcefully, almost knocking us down. "When you have your own children, you can raise them however you want," he bellowed, his strong moonshine breath making me recoil. "Until then, don't interfere." That's when it happened. With a scream of rage that seemed to come from the depths of hell, Father grabbed Thaddeus by the hair and threw him against the mirror with all his might. The sound of shattering glass mixed with Thaddeus's screams and our desperate sobs. Thaddeus fell to the floor, surrounded by shards of glass. His face was covered in blood, pieces of glass embedded in his skin, like small, shining daggers. It was a nightmare scene to see my brother there amid that destruction. It was at this moment that Mother finally found the courage to intervene. She ran into the living room, screaming for Father to stop, but his fury was uncontrollable. He pushed Thaddeus aside as if he were a rag doll and turned to Mother. What followed was screams and sounds of struggle. I couldn't see clearly what was happening between them because my attention was completely focused on Thaddeus. Along with Maddox, Juniper, and the twins, we knelt around him, our hands trembling as we tried to remove the shards of glass from his bloodied face. Thaddeus moaned softly, his eyes half closed with pain. "It's okay. It's okay," I repeated, more to calm myself than anything else. But it wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. When the storm finally passed, the house fell into a frightening silence. Father had left, slamming the door so hard that the walls shook. Mother was in the kitchen, sobbing softly, and we children were there in the middle of the living room, surrounded by shards of glass and bloodstains, trying to care for our injured brother. It was Juniper who had the idea to go to Mrs. Whittaker. She ran down the street, her bare feet raising dust, while Maddox and I tried to clean Thaddeus's face as best we could. I saw that Maddox was very frightened. He was almost crying, seeing Thaddeus injured. Mrs. Whittaker arrived like a saving angel. She didn't ask questions, just acted. With the help of Mr. Poulter, a neighbor who had an old car, she took us to the hospital in the neighboring town. Mother stayed behind, perhaps out of fear, perhaps out of shame. She was badly hurt. At the hospital, the fluorescent lights seemed to expose even more the cruelty of what had happened. Thaddeus needed several stitches on his cheeks, forehead, even near his eye. The doctor looked at us with a mixture of pity and suspicion, but didn't ask many questions. That night, we all slept at Mrs. Whitaker's house. She arranged mattresses on the living room floor, and we stayed together like a litter of frightened puppies. Thaddeus slept restlessly, occasionally moaning in pain. I held his hand, as if I could protect him from all the evils of the world. In the days that followed, I saw something change in Thaddeus. He who had always been so full of life and music seemed to be closing into a shell of shame and self-deprecation. He avoided looking at any reflective surface, as if afraid of what he might see. One afternoon, I caught him looking at his reflection in the window glass. His fingers delicately traced the lines of the stitches on his face, and I saw silent tears running down his cheeks. When he noticed my presence, he quickly moved away, as if he had been caught doing something wrong. "Thaddeus," I called softly, approaching him. "There's nothing wrong with you. You're perfect, just the way you are." He looked at me, his eyes full of such deep sadness that it broke my heart. "No, I'm not Winnie," he whispered. "I'm a disgrace. Father is right. There's something wrong with me. But if you think that when Father saw my brother's face, he felt compassion or regretted something, that's where you're wrong. Nothing changed at our house. I mean, to be fair, Maddox was being a little easier on him. One afternoon, after another beating from Father because he was helping in the kitchen, Thaddeus hugged me tightly and whispered, "Sometimes I think it would be better if I didn't exist. Maybe then Father would stop drinking, Maddox would stop hating me, and Mother wouldn't cry." It was at that moment that I understood the true weight my brother carried. It wasn't just the fear of physical violence or taunts. It was the weight of feeling wrong, defective, as if his very existence was a sin. The days in the small town became increasingly difficult for Thaddeus. At 14, he was beginning to better understand his feelings, and that frightened him. One day, returning from church after practicing piano, he told me about an incident that left him devastated. "Gareth passed by the church while I was playing," he said in a low voice, his eyes tearing up. "He stopped to listen and smiled at me. My heart beat so fast that I missed all the notes. Then the boys who were with him started laughing and making gestures. Gareth laughed along with them, Winnie. It hurt so much. At school, things got worse. The girls actually liked Thaddeus. After all, even with his scars, he was handsome. They found him gentle and sensitive, but this only increased the boys' taunts. "Look at the girl's little boyfriend," they would shout during recess. One day, I found Thaddeus crying, hidden behind the school. Some boys had written slurs on the cover of his music notebook. At home, Maddox sometimes felt like stirring up trouble and decided to bother Thaddeus. He began to spread his suspicions. "Dad, did you know Thaddeus stares at the boys at school?" he would say during dinner, making Father turn red with anger, leading to more beatings for Thaddeus. One night, my brother confided his deepest fears to me. "You know what scares me most, Winnie," he whispered in our room. "It's not just Father or the beatings or the taunts. It's this feeling inside." He pointed to his chest. "It's as if I carry a secret so big that it will swallow me one day. Sometimes I wake up at night, suffocating with fear that everyone will find out." Thaddeus began to create small rituals to protect himself. He avoided looking directly at other boys, always kept his arms close to his body, tried to deepen his voice when speaking. It was painful to see my brother trying to hide from himself. "Yesterday in church," he continued, "the Reverend said that God loves all his children. Do you think he loves me too, even though I'm like this?" I hugged him tightly, feeling his small body tremble with contained sobs. "Of course he does," I replied, although my heart was also full of doubts and fears. Ms. Blackwood seemed to be the only adult who really understood Thaddeus. One day, after a difficult piano lesson where Thaddeus couldn't concentrate after another taunt from the boys, she sat beside him on the piano bench. "You know, Thaddeus," she said softly, "piano keys are like people. Some are white, others are black, but all are necessary to make music. And the most beautiful music happens when they all work together in harmony." Thaddeus looked at her with wide eyes, understanding the message between the lines. It was the first time I saw an adult try, even if indirectly, to tell him that it was okay to be different. But Miss Blackwood's understanding was an exception in a world that seemed determined to break Thaddeus's spirit. It was 1958. I was only 13 when my life changed forever. Our home became a battlefield because of my father's addiction to card games. 5-card stud, faro, craps. To tell you the truth, I don't even know exactly how to say the names of these games, because it didn't matter which game, as long as there was a chance for a bet. At first, it was small things that disappeared. Mother's radio vanished from the kitchen one day. Then it was the crochet rugs that Mother had made with such care. With each object that disappeared, Mother would cry in silence, and I felt a knot in my stomach that only grew. On that dark night, Father arrived home accompanied. It wasn't uncommon for him to bring friends from the bar, but something was different. Mr. Poulter, an old widower known for his drinking, staggered in behind him. The smell of moonshine was so strong it made my eyes burn. "Woman, pack the girl's things," Father shouted, a crooked smile on his face. "She's going with Poulter." My heart stopped. Mother, who was in the kitchen, came running. "What are you saying?" "Lost in the game," he said, as if he were talking about the weather. "The girl belongs to Poulter now." I widened my eyes, unable to believe what I was hearing. Mother stood in front of me, arms spread like protective wings. "You've gone mad. She's not a game prize. My daughter only leaves here over my dead body." Father, with bloodshot eyes and a dangerous gleam, replied, "My word doesn't go back. Poulter, take her." The old man moved toward me and had the audacity to say with malicious eyes, "Little Winnie has grown up." I tried to run, but Father grabbed Mother, preventing her from helping me. I screamed, begged, struggled. In the yard, I saw Mrs. Whitaker peeking through the window, her eyes wide with horror, but she did nothing to help. As I was dragged outside, I heard the sounds of the fight exploding inside the house. Punches, screams, the noise of things breaking. I wanted to go back, help Mother, but Mr. Poulter was too strong. I was thrown into an old pickup truck. The engine roared, and the lights of our house were left behind, along with my childhood. Mr. Poulter's house was surprisingly large and well-maintained. It didn't match the disheveled man who was dragging me by the arm. "I want a good dinner," he growled. "Then you'll wash up. You're my woman now." I was paralyzed, unable to process what was happening. My mind screamed that this couldn't be real, that I would wake up at any moment from this terrible nightmare. Mr. Poulter pushed me into the kitchen. "If you don't do what I say, I'll go get your sister Juniper, too," he threatened, before staggering into the living room. What that old man said Juniper was only 8 years old, but from what I understood, my father must have bet her too. That I could not accept. With trembling hands, I began to search the cabinets. I found some vegetables, rice, beans. Mechanically, I began to prepare the meal, silent tears falling into the pot as I cooked. The smell of food must have awakened something in Mr. Poulter. I heard his heavy footsteps approaching. "Smells good, Winnie," he muttered, entering the kitchen. "Maybe you'll be good for something after all." I served the food without saying a word, avoiding looking at him. Mr. Poulter ate like a hungry animal, throwing more out of his mouth than in. When he finished, he belched loudly and stood up. "I'm going to sleep," he announced. "Tomorrow we'll sort out the rest." He gave me a look that made me freeze inside. "Don't try to run away. There's nowhere for you to go anyway," he said. I heard his footsteps moving away, and soon after, the sound of a heavy body falling onto the bed. The idea of running away crossed my mind, but Mr. Poulter was right. Where would I go? Going back home meant facing my father's fury, and I had no one else in the world. Slowly, I let myself slide to the floor, hugging my knees. The tears I had been holding back finally came. I cried silently, afraid of waking the monster in the next room. That night, lying on the hard kitchen floor, I prayed as I had never prayed before. With fervor, I asked God to protect me and give me strength to face what was to come. I begged him to take care of my mother, and especially my sister. I also prayed that somehow my father would realize the evil he had done. The sound of Mr. Poulter's snores echoed through the house. Amid my prayers, a clear idea emerged in my mind. This was my chance to escape. As I whispered pleas for help to the Virgin Mary, I thought of Reverend Hayes, known for always helping those in need. Perhaps he could shelter me in the church until I found a way to escape this situation permanently. My plan, actually, was to ask the Reverend to help me contact Thaddeus. Then I would run away with him, who knows where. At that time, I was extremely innocent, completely unaware of marital intimacies. It didn't even cross my mind that Mr. Poulter might have intentions beyond making me his housekeeper, cooking, washing his clothes, and taking care of the home. My naivety, however, didn't diminish the fear and urgency I felt to escape. With my heart racing and trembling hands, I sneaked out in the early morning. It was a long way to the church. I walked a lot, with nothing but the clothes on my back. Just my old dress and my flip-flops that broke along the way, leaving me barefoot. The church would be my temporary refuge, and Reverend Hayes, my hope for salvation. Occasionally a car would pass, and I would hide behind some bush, afraid of being seen. When I finally spotted the small church, it was almost morning. My legs were shaking with fatigue and hunger. My feet were nothing but blisters because of the stones on the path, but the relief of having arrived gave me the strength to knock on the back door where the Reverend lived. Reverend Hayes opened the door with eyes wide with shock at seeing me in that state. "Are you all right, my child?" he asked, taking me inside, asking if something had happened to my brother. He knew our family's story well. After all, we always confessed and unburdened ourselves to him. But the Reverend didn't help much beyond giving advice, and his concern was touching. I explained that it was I who was in trouble. Between sobs, I told the Reverend about my father's addiction, the gambling, Mr. Poulter, how I had fled in the middle of the night. His face grew paler and paler as I spoke. "My God," he murmured when I finished. "This is serious, very serious." He ran his hand through his grey hair. "Don't worry, I'll help you." That day, Reverend Hayes, God rest his soul, took me inside the parsonage. A holy man, he gave me a warm blanket and a piece of bread with butter. "Eat a little, child," he said. "You need strength." Then he told me to stay quietly hidden there, like a mouse, until my brother appeared. He gave me his sofa to lie on and said I was protected there. "Don't cry, child. We'll think of something," he said with a gentle voice. "Tomorrow we'll talk more." But my head wouldn't stop. I kept thinking about Mr. Poulter. What would he do when he saw I was gone? It was terrifying. The next day, Reverend Hayes came with 2 small bags in his hand. He said they were donated clothes for the parish. I saw there were some pieces that fit me. He told me to take a bath. It was almost night when I heard Thaddeus's voice echoing through the church. "Where is she, Reverend? I know she's here." My brother spoke desperately. I ran outside, throwing myself into his arms. Thaddeus hugged me tightly. His familiar smell comforted me a little. "Are you all right? Did that old man hurt you?" he asked with red eyes, as if he had been crying. I shook my head. "No, I ran away before he could do anything." I told everything again to Thaddeus. He was furious, threatened to kill Father, but the Reverend tried to calm things down. "Violence is not the answer, my young man. We need to think calmly and, most importantly, have faith," he said. "God doesn't abandon his children." My brother sighed with relief. He turned to the Reverend. "What are we going to do now?" That night, after Thaddeus arrived at the church, Reverend Hayes took us to the back of the parish. He had a worried but determined look. "Children," he said, "you can't stay here. It's too dangerous. Soon they'll come looking for you here." My heart tightened. Where would we go? It was then that the Reverend told us about his sister, Mrs. Cordelia Hayes, a widow who lived in Pittsburgh. "She has a huge heart," explained the Reverend. "I'm sure she can help you, at least in the beginning." While the Reverend made the call, Thaddeus and I looked at each other, a mixture of fear and hope in our eyes. Pittsburgh. I had only heard of it, never imagined myself leaving for there. We heard the Reverend explaining the situation, his voice low and urgent. After a few minutes, he hung up the phone with a sigh of relief. "She'll help," he announced. The plan was simple but frightening. The Reverend would buy bus tickets to Pittsburgh. Thaddeus would return home to get our things, while I would stay hidden in the church. "Don't worry, Winnie," he said, holding my hands. "I'll be quick and careful. I promise I'll come back for you." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining Thaddeus at home, trying not to make noise while packing our things. What if Father woke up? What if Mr. Poulter appeared looking for me? The hours dragged on. Every noise made me jump. The Reverend tried to calm me, bringing me tea and cookies, but my stomach was too knotted to eat anything. Finally, just before dawn, there were soft knocks on the door. It was Thaddeus. He was breathless, carrying 2 old suitcases. "I did it," he whispered, a tired smile on his face. Thaddeus told me in whispers, broken by emotion, how it all happened. Mother was keeping vigil when he arrived home, her eyes red from crying. She was startled by his sudden arrival, fearing the worst. But when Thaddeus explained our escape plan, I could tell from his eyes that something changed in her demeanor. A mixture of relief and deep pain took over her face. With trembling hands and tears, Mother helped pack our things. She understood, in the depths of her broken heart, that my departure was the only way out. Thaddeus told me, she said, "It's better this way, daughter. Far away but safe. And you, my son, take care of her, as I know you always have." What terrified me was knowing that Mr. Poulter had been at our house earlier, demanding my return. Mother, with an almost vanished voice, told Thaddeus that Father, drunk and desperate, had said that if I didn't return, he would have to pay the debt. But there wasn't a penny in the house. The fear in Mother's eyes as she related this to Thaddeus. My brother said he would never forget it. It was at that moment that she realized there was no other option. Our escape wasn't just a choice. It was our only option. She wanted to come say goodbye to you, Thaddeus said sadly, but it was too risky. She sent word that she loves you very much, and that one day we'll meet again. That hurt more than anything, knowing I couldn't hug my mother one last time, couldn't say goodbye to my little siblings. But I knew it was necessary. The Reverend hurried us. "You need to go now," he said. "The bus leaves in an hour." With my heart in my throat, we took our suitcases and followed the Reverend to the bus terminal. It was early. The sun had barely risen, and the streets were deserted. Even so, every shadow seemed to hide a threat. At the terminal, the Reverend gave us the tickets and an envelope. "There's a little money in here," he explained. "It's not much, but it should help in the first few days. My sister will be waiting for you at the Pittsburgh bus terminal. Wear this red handkerchief tied around your wrist. She'll know it's you." We hugged him tightly, thanking him for everything. The Reverend blessed us, tears in his eyes. "May God protect you, my children," he said. When the bus began to move, I felt as if I were leaving a part of myself behind. Thaddeus held my hand tightly. "It's going to be all right," he whispered. "We're together now." The journey to Pittsburgh was long and tiring. We passed through towns and landscapes we had never seen before. Thaddeus was amazed by everything, pointing things out through the window. I tried to share his enthusiasm, but my heart was heavy, thinking of everything we had left behind. We arrived in Pittsburgh when it was already night. The terminal was huge, noisy, and full of people. I had never seen so many people together in my life. Thaddeus held my hand tightly, afraid we might get lost. As soon as we got off in front of the bus, there she was. Mrs. Cordelia Hayes was a gray-haired lady with a gentle smile. She hugged us as if she had known us forever. I felt good with her right away, and from what I could tell, so did Thaddeus. "Welcome, children," she said. "Let's go home." Mrs. Hayes's house was small but cozy. She gave us a little room in the back with 2 twin beds. "It's not much," she apologized, "but it's from the heart." The first days were difficult. Everything was so different, so big, so noisy. I cried every night, missing home, Mother, my little siblings. Even Maddox I missed. Thaddeus tried to comfort me, but I could see he was suffering too. Mrs. Hayes was an angel. She helped us get documents. We discovered we didn't even have birth certificates. Thaddeus was the first to get a job. A friend of Mrs. Hayes had a music venue and needed someone to play the piano on Friday and Saturday nights. It didn't pay much, but it was a start. Seeing Thaddeus's face light up when he played was as if all the pain and suffering disappeared for a moment. I took a little longer to adjust. I still had nightmares about Mr. Poulter, still jumped at loud noises. But gradually, with the help of Thaddeus and Mrs. Hayes, I calmed down. I got a job as a domestic worker for a family in the neighborhood. The mistress, Mrs. Prudence Hayes, was strict but fair. She was moved by my story and even began to teach me how to cook different dishes. The months passed, and slowly we adapted to life in the big city. Thaddeus continued playing at the music venue, but also began giving music lessons to neighborhood children. I, besides working at Mrs. Hayes's house, started doing some sewing jobs that I had learned from my mother. But not everything was rosy. Homesickness was constant. Sometimes I caught Thaddeus crying secretly, looking at an old family photo he had brought. I myself had days when sadness was so great that I could barely get out of bed. One night, after a particularly difficult day, Thaddeus and I stayed up talking late. "Do you think we did the right thing?" I asked, tears streaming down my face. Thaddeus was silent for a moment, then said, "I don't know if it was right or wrong, Winnie, but I know it was necessary. Here we can be ourselves, understand? Here no one beats me for being different. Here you don't risk being sold or traded like merchandise." He was right, of course, but that didn't lessen the pain of homesickness. "I promised Mother we would return one day," Thaddeus continued, "and we will return when we're ready, when we can help them too." When December arrived, Mrs. Hayes' house came to life. Her children, Prescott Hayes and Tallulah Hayes Montgomery, appeared for the end-of-year festivities, bringing their own children and spouses. Prescott came with his wife, Prudence Hayes, and their children, Gareth and Clementine Hayes. Tallulah arrived with her husband, Clifford Montgomery, and their children, Jasper, Fletcher, and Willa Montgomery. There were 5 children in all with ages close to ours, between 12 and 16 years old. The house, once quiet, now buzzed with conversations, laughter, and the contagious energy of youth. Mrs. Cordelia Hayes was Reverend Hayes's sister, and her family structure was quite extensive. Prescott was her oldest son, married to Prudence, with their children Gareth and Clementine. Tallulah was Mrs. Hayes's daughter, married to Clifford Montgomery, with their 3 children, Jasper, Fletcher, and Willa. Understanding these family connections helped me navigate the complex dynamics that would soon impact our lives in unexpected ways. At first, I felt intimidated by so many new people, but the children soon welcomed us, especially Willa, who was exactly my age. It was on one of those nights, while everyone was gathered in the living room, that something changed. Thaddeus was sitting on the sofa, telling stories about our hometown, when Gareth, Prescott's son, joined him. The two began talking animatedly about music, their eyes shining with enthusiasm. I saw Thaddeus's face blush slightly, and Gareth smiled in a different way. In the kitchen, helping Mrs. Hayes with the Christmas dinner, I noticed Prescott and his wife conversing in low voices, casting concerned glances toward the living room. My heart froze. Had they noticed something? Was Thaddeus in danger again? The days that followed were intense. Gareth and Thaddeus spent more and more time together, talking about music, books, and dreams. I saw my brother smile in a way I had never seen before. His eyes shone differently. One afternoon, while everyone was in the yard, I saw Gareth running his hand over the scars on my brother's face, and Thaddeus, with his head down, sad, was certainly telling him about that nightmare day. Their fingers touched for a moment, and both blushed, quickly pulling their hands away, but without stopping smiling. Clementine, Gareth's sister, seemed to notice the closeness between the two. Several times I caught her observing them with a discreet smile, as if keeping a secret. She didn't say anything, but her eyes were kind when she looked at Thaddeus. The adults, on the other hand, seemed increasingly tense. Tallulah and Prescott exchanged worried glances when the boys were together. Mrs. Hayes seemed divided, alternating between affectionate smiles and expressions of concern. One night, I accidentally overheard a conversation between Gareth and Clementine. They were in the next room, and their voices crossed the thin wall. "He's so amazing, Clementine," Gareth whispered. "I've never met anyone like Thaddeus. When I'm with him, I feel like I can be myself, you know." "I understand, Gareth," Clementine replied softly. "He is special. Just be careful, okay? Not everyone understands." That conversation left me with a heavy heart. On one hand, I was happy that Thaddeus had found someone who appreciated him for who he was. On the other, the fear I had carried for so many years was still there, making me fear what might happen. The days passed and the tension in the house seemed to increase. Prescott drank more than normal, his eyes always fixed on Thaddeus and Gareth when they were together. Tallulah tried to keep the peace, but I saw the fear in her eyes. Everything changed on a cold night in November. Dinner was served. Everyone gathered at the table when Prescott, Gareth's father, began to speak louder than normal. The wine had already gone to his head. "This isn't right," he said, hitting his clenched fist on the table. "This boy is confusing my son's head. I won't allow this in my family." Prudence tried to calm her husband, but he continued. "Don't you see the way Thaddeus looks at my son? This is an abomination." Thaddeus turned as white as paper, his hands trembling so much that he dropped his water glass. Gareth tried to defend him, to say something, but his father ordered him to shut up, threatening to put him in a reformatory school. Mrs. Hayes, our protector until then, was divided. I saw in her eyes the internal battle between the commitment she had with her brother, Reverend Hayes, and the fear of losing her family. After a heavy silence, she said with a trembling voice, "Thaddeus, Winnie, maybe it's better if you look for another place for a while, until things calm down." "But Grandma," Clementine protested, crying. Tallulah held Gareth, who was trying to break free. "When they leave, you can come back," Mrs. Hayes whispered to us. "Forgive me, but they're my children, my grandchildren." We left in the cold night, with only our old suitcases. Thaddeus didn't say a word, but I saw silent tears running down his face. Once again, we were alone in the world. The only place left to us was Macready's Melody House, where Thaddeus played piano. Mr. Linus Macready, the owner, a soft-hearted man, was horrified when we told him what had happened. "You can stay in the storage room," he said, leading us to the back of the music venue. "It's not much, but there's an old mattress, and at least it's dry." The storage room was a dark cubicle full of cockroaches that ran along the peeling walls. The smell of mold mixed with that of old alcohol. We arranged the mattress in a corner, between beer boxes and empty bottles. At night, lying on that hard mattress, hearing the sound of cockroaches and the distant music from the venue, Thaddeus finally broke down. "Why, Winnie? Why can't I be happy? Why does everyone find me so disgusting?" I hugged my brother tightly, feeling his body tremble with sobs. "Don't talk like that. There's nothing wrong with you. It's them who don't understand." The next morning we found a note that Gareth had managed to deliver to Mr. Macready. "Forgive me," it said. "I tried to talk to my father, but he threatened to send me to a reformatory. I'll never forget you." Thaddeus kept the note in his shirt pocket, close to his heart. That night, when he went to play piano at the music venue, his music was different, sadder, deeper. People applauded without understanding that each note carried a piece of his broken heart. Mr. Macready tried to cheer us up, bringing leftovers from the venue, telling stories from his homeland. But I saw the concern in his eyes. We couldn't stay there forever, among drink boxes and cockroaches. 3 days later, when we thought things couldn't get worse, Mrs. Hayes appeared at the music venue, breathless and pale with worry. "Children, come quickly. Reverend Hayes is on the phone. It's urgent." We ran after her, hearts pounding. At the house, Mrs. Hayes's family was gathered in the living room, all with tense expressions. Tallulah led us to the phone while the others waited anxiously. When I heard Reverend Hayes's voice on the phone, my heart froze. He said my father had been killed because of gambling debts. My mother was desperate, poor thing, not knowing what to do, and my little siblings were all scared, needing help. I didn't have time to think properly about what the Reverend said, nor could I tell Thaddeus. Suddenly, I heard a scream from the back of the house. It was Willa, shouting, "Help! Gareth! He—" I dropped the phone and ran. Everyone ran together. When we reached the bathroom, oh, Mary, what a sad scene. Gareth was lying on the floor white as paper. Beside him, an empty medicine bottle. His father, Prescott, was screaming for help. His mother, Prudence, was crying, trying to wake the boy with light taps on his face. Thaddeus stood frozen at the door with a frightened face that was pitiful to see. "Willa, poor thing," said between sobs. He didn't want to go to the reformatory. He said he couldn't take it anymore." In the chaos that followed, I picked up a crumpled piece of paper that had fallen from Gareth's hand. It was a letter written in a trembling hand. "I can't live like this anymore. Father said he's going to send me to a place to cure me. He said people like me don't deserve to live, but I can't change who I am. Thaddeus, forgive me." The tears blurred my vision. I understood then the desperation that must have taken hold of Gareth, the pain of feeling rejected by those who should love him unconditionally. It was a terrible confusion. Someone called an ambulance. Mrs. Hayes tried to calm everyone down. Prudence and Clifford took care of Gareth. I held Thaddeus, who looked like he was going to faint. The ambulance arrived in minutes that seemed like hours. While the paramedics worked frantically to stabilize Gareth, we discovered that the boy was alive. I saw Prescott's face change. The initial shock gave way to an expression of deep shame and regret. Thaddeus insisted on going in the ambulance with Gareth. No one had the courage to stop him. So he, Prudence, and Prescott left while the vehicle moved away. Sirens on. The family remained in a heavy silence, broken only by muffled sobs. It was Mrs. Hayes who finally spoke, her voice trembling with emotion. "What have we done? How did we let it get to this point?" Reverend Hayes's call was forgotten for a moment. The future, which was already uncertain, now seemed even more nebulous. How would this family deal with what happened, and what impact would it have on our lives, especially Thaddeus's? The answers to these questions would have to wait. At that moment, all we could do was wait and pray for Gareth's recovery. Look, my child, let me tell you how that day was. It was just beginning when I realized I had left the Reverend talking to himself on the phone. It was Fletcher, who told me that his grandmother, Mrs. Hayes, had to hang up to call the ambulance for Gareth. Oh, Mary, what confusion! When things calmed down a bit, everyone wanted to know what the Reverend had told me. I told them with a heavy heart about my father being killed because of gambling debts, about my desperate mother, my frightened little siblings. Everyone looked at me with a shocked face. That's when we remembered that Thaddeus had gone to the hospital with Gareth and didn't know about the tragedy in our family. Mrs. Hayes, poor thing, was in a terrible bind. She asked me if I was leaving or if I would wait for Thaddeus to return. I said I had to go. My mother needed me. Thank God, I had saved a little money for the bus fare. I packed my things and went to the bus terminal. The bus would take about 2 hours to arrive. Girl, those were the 2 longest hours of my life. I sat there on a hard bench, thinking about everything that had happened. I was 14 years old, you know, still a girl. We had stayed for 8 months at Mrs. Hayes's house. That kind lady I'll never forget. When I finally arrived in my little town, exhausted from the journey of more than 8 hours, it was already night, and I still had to walk to our house. I had made the difficult decision to return home after learning about Father's death, while Thaddeus stayed behind with Gareth. It was far from the Trailways bus terminal. That suitcase. Look, it seemed to weigh a ton. The suitcase was light with my few things, but heavy because of the distance I had to walk. I remember thinking about hiding the suitcase in the bushes and coming back for it later, so I could go more quickly home. But then I was afraid someone would find it, and I would lose the few rags I had. As I walked, I kept thinking about Thaddeus. How was he doing? Did he already know about Father? And Gareth, had he survived? So many questions in my head, girl, and that heavy suitcase. When I finally spotted our little house, my heart raced. Everything was dark and quiet. I entered softly, afraid of waking everyone, but then I saw a faint light coming from the kitchen. It was my mother, poor thing, sitting next to the cast-iron pot-belly stove, praying softly. When she saw me, she stood still for a moment, as if she didn't believe it. Then she got up and hugged me tightly. She cried so much. I cried too. I was so happy to hug her. How I missed my dear mother. Mother looked anxiously behind me, expecting to see Thaddeus. I calmed her, quickly explaining that he was fine and would come later, but I didn't say anything about what had happened with Gareth. I said it was because of his job. My God! Mother began to tell of the damage Father had done before he died. What she told me was extremely painful for me, and you will be as shocked as I was that day. Each of her words was like a stab in my chest. I could barely breathe as she unraveled that rosary of horrors. 10 years have passed since the day I left Whispering Pines with a broken heart and a wounded soul. Today, as I sit by the window of my small apartment in Pittsburgh, watching the autumn leaves change color, I no longer feel that pain. Instead, there is a strange sense of peace. A kind of peace that the 11-year-old girl I once was could never have dreamed of. There are still nights when I dream of the old house, of my father's angry shouts, of the bruises on Thaddeus's face, of my mother's tear-filled eyes. But now, those memories no longer jolt me awake in panic. They are just ghosts of the past, reminding me of the road I've traveled. Thaddeus has become a renowned pianist, just as he once dreamed. Maddox, after many years, came to find us, his eyes red and his apology sincere. Juniper is now a teacher, and the twins, Silas and Sawyer, are in college, something we never dared to imagine during those dark days. As for me, I've learned how to forgive, not just my father or Maddox or Mr. Poulter, but myself as well. I've learned not to blame myself for things beyond my control. I've learned to love and to accept the wounds of the heart as a part of who I am. Every scar on my body and soul tells a story, not of pain and loss, but of strength and resilience. Like broken pottery mended with gold in the Japanese art of kintsugi, the cracks within me now gleam with gold. If you're going through dark times like I once did, know that the light is still there, waiting for you at the end of the road. Keep walking, even if your feet are bleeding. Keep loving, even if your heart is shattered. Because one day, you'll look back and realize that it was those very wounds that made you the strong person you are today. If my story has touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapter of this healing journey. Together, we'll learn how to turn pain into strength and transform a dark past into a bright future.